Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Social Housing Roundtable. Lovely to see so many people with us on this Tuesday. I know it's half term, so I'm really grateful for so many people who've been able to jump on today already. It's going to be a really, really powerful session today, so I'm delighted that we've been able to put this together. And I will give a bit of an update just in terms of how this has come about in just a moment. But for those who are new to the Social Housing Roundtable, welcome. Very, very glad to have you here. My name's Matt Baird. I've been running this now for 3-4 years. Sorry, Tracy, just going to mute you there. So I've been running this now for 3 or 4 years, and the idea was to bring people together every single week to have a conversation around something to do with the social housing space. We've done 130 something, 140 maybe sessions now. We've got over 1,500 people that have joined us, and we're growing all the time. So it's fantastic to have you all with us, and I hope this is if it is your first one, the first of many you can come to. I'd say my name's Matt Baird. This whole thing is funded by my recruitment business. So I've been recruiting in the social housing space now for 13 years. I've recruited right from kind of frontline staff through to chief execs and directors most recently. So if you are looking for any recruitment support, please know that that funds this and keeps it free for everybody to stay open and available. So if you are looking for support, please do reach out. So on to today. I first met Alozie. We were just discussing just before we jumped on today, nearly 18 months ago now. It was at Housing 2023, back when it was still being run by the CIH. And we got chatting at I believe a HDN networking event after the session. Bit of a couple of beers, whatever else. I'm chatting. Said, look, you really need to come into the roundtable. You really need to come and kind of talk about what Unify are doing, some of the work that's going on. I think it'd be brilliant to bring to the community. And it's only taken nearly 18 months, but we've got there. So I'm absolutely delighted that we have. And today is going to be the first, hopefully, of a series we're going to do. We're going to do a bit of a few sessions next year. So today is very much kind of an intro around Unify, where they've come from, what's next, and then some general more kind of questions around. In fact, I won't spoil it because we've got some brilliant conversations to come up. So we've got Alozie with us and we've got Dami with us today, who's asked me to call her Dami, so that's absolutely fine. Please don't anybody think I'm just guessing names. So I've got Alozie and Dami with us. Alozie, I'm going to pass over to you and Dami to do introductions, and then over to yourself, who I believe is going to kind of kickstart today's session on, I guess, a bit of the history of Unify, where you are now, and then we can pass over to Dami for what comes next. So welcome. I'm delighted to have you here, and I'll pass over to you now.
Thank you, Matt. It's great to be here, and welcome everybody for joining us. I think it'll be a good session. In terms of introductions, my name is Alozie Ohuonu. I'm the current vice chair of Unify Network. I've been with Unify since about 2016, end of 2016, so quite a little while now. I've seen quite a lot of development through that, and worked with Dami for a lot of that time as well. So I'll just let Dami introduce herself.
My name is Dami, and I'm the co-chair of Unify. Recently come into that position in July this year, and along with myself and Violet Pugh from Metropolitan Thames Valley, we both co-chair Unify with Alozie. Similar to what Alozie said, I have worked with Unify over the years, maybe not 2016, Alozie, probably a bit later than that, but I worked with Alozie and the Unify team in various capacities until taking up the role of co-chair in July this year. Myself and Alozie worked on the mentoring program and a couple of other things. So yeah, I have been working in and out of Unify for a while now. So yeah, lovely to meet everyone and hope we have a really great conversation. So I'm going to hand over to Alozie. So we're going to do a bit of a tag team. Like I said, Alozie's been through all of the iterations of Unify, so he's going to give us a bit of a background of the history of Unify, why Unify came to be, and I will do a bit of looking forward, what we are hoping to be able to achieve with Unify and our member organizations and the core group of people that we serve moving forward. And yeah, we can take the conversation from there, as Matt said. So I'm going to hand over to Alozie. It's a bit of a tag team here. So Alozie is going to start and give us a bit of a background of why Unify came to be.
Thank you, Dami. So Unify, some of you may be aware of who we are and what we do, particularly if you work within the G15. But I suspect a lot of people don't know at all. So today I'm here to kind of walk you through a VIP whistle-stop tour. So, you get the privilege of that. So Unify, our title kind of is what it says on the tin. We formed formally in 2016. We're about advocacy through networking and connection. And actually, that's how we formed. Our founders were chairs of ethnicity resource groups or staff networks, as they're called now. And they came from 5 founding organizations within the G15, which were Genesis Housing at the time. Representative for that was Leona Menville, who was our previous co-chair or previous chair. And then we also had Notting Hill Genesis, which was represented by Anthony Wary, who was one of our other founding members. And then we had L&Q represented by Elaine Lewis. And we had Clarion Housing, which was represented by Jean Kakaya. And finally, we had Peabody as one of our founding members, which was represented by our previous chair, Alison Muir, who some of you might be aware of as well. So, you know, I say those names proudly because it's important for us as Unify to pay tribute to the hard work they put in. We truly stand on the shoulders of giants. And it's important to kind of note how Unify came together because within the period of 2015 to 2016, staff network forums were just kind of finding their feet and forming within the housing sector. And to be honest, it was quite a lonely place. I know now staff network leads still struggle in terms of that kind of connection and having that base of understanding what other organizations are doing. But in general, at that time, within 2015, 2016, being a staff network lead, whether it was the ethnicity staff network lead or LGBTQ plus staff network lead or disability staff network lead, it was a very isolated position. And actually, people probably felt quite alone. And that's how Unify came to be, because these 5 brilliant people decided to connect informally, just meeting for coffees, having conversations about their different organizations, you know, talking about best practice. What does your organization do in terms of representation? What does your organization do to help its staff who are going through difficult periods? And out of that conversation came an idea that actually, let's unify, let's, let's come together and create a group or a network that comes together regularly, that allows people to share best practice and actually just have a safe space to talk about those things that, some of those who are not maybe in that position may not understand fully. So I kind of bring that to the forefront because kind of that's what we stand for in terms of having that safe space, having that place for advocacy, and also having that space for conversation to happen without any judgment and within that safe area. In terms of the way we operate historically, Unify is a family of volunteers. As I say, it is a network. Like some of the people you see within your own organizations, everyone has their other day jobs. I work for Camden Council and Building Safety, but I volunteer for Unify in my position as a vice chair. So these people also have families to feed, stresses to overcome, just like everybody else. Yet we still find the energy to try and persevere. So I just have to put my hands up and applaud the team and applaud anybody who's volunteering in the sector and trying to do their day job as well. There's certainly a couple of key aims, which, Dami will definitely talk through in a bit more detail that we're trying to fulfill within our role. For the forefront, we kind of look to deliver cross-organizational events, such as staff network forums, where we give a space for staff network leads in G15 organizations at the moment, to really come together and talk about some of the things that they're kind of working through in terms of best practice and challenges and try to support them through that. We have a whole host of cultural events that we host, from conferences all the way down to just socials where we get people together from diverse groups, allies and so forth, just to make sure there is that space for connection. And then we also have a lot of work that we do with partners, in partnership with member organizations to try and increase diverse opportunities at all levels. That's at board representation, executive or senior leadership level, and even at management level where there is a need. So we've got a whole host of programs that kind of do that, and we kind of deliver services in a number of ways. Then I'll pass over because I'm sure you're very bored of listening to me talk at the moment. So, one of the key services that we deliver for our member staff, as I said, is those events that we look to host. We've partnered with quite a lot of organizations like House Proud. We go to Pride events. We go to Black Pride as well and have representation there. We do events around Ramadan and Christmas and so on, which is, looked after by one of our events directors called Kelly Thomas. And then for people kind of seeking leadership skills and looking for leadership programs, we have a flagship program called Leadership Now, which we're running, which, we'll talk about a little bit later on in the program. And then finally, we look at trying to just bring together those staff network leads, as I was speaking about earlier. But before I kind of close it off, I want to kind of get to where we are now. There's been now you kind of understand operationally what we do. It's been quite a journey in terms of Unify 2016 to Unify 2024. And the best way for me to actually kind of talk through that is some of the key milestone events that we've hosted with key leaders within the housing sector, which have brought about some important discussion points. I think in about 2017, we held our first annual event, which was a Q&A session held at Notting Hill Housing Association. It was called 30 Years Forward. We had some key industry leaders in there who were talking about what the future of the sector looks like from a ethnic or global majority, however you want to put it, perspective in terms of how we want to move the sector forward, and not just from representation, but also for giving people a voice to be heard. And then we moved into the same year, we had a BAME housing leadership discussion, which was held at Clarion Housing Group. The discussion was around leadership with different panel members talking about their experiences and giving people who haven't had that leadership experience that opportunity to hear about what they could do to put themselves in better positions to get in those leadership roles. And then we kind of moved into one of our flagship events, which was called Shining a Spotlight on BAME. I know there's been a lot of conversation about the term BAME, but I'm using it because that's how we termed it at the time. And, that was in October of 2019. And this is kind of a key milestone for Unify because we brought together, the CEOs from the largest member organizations within the G15. That was Clarion, Peabody, L&Q, Metropolitan, Thames Valley Housing, and Notting Hill Genesis. And we invited them for a sit down together, like we're doing today, Matt, to have an open discussion about, global majority staff. We invited the staff to come and attend as well, so that it can be an open conversation. And some of the key things that came out of that were really poignant because actually CEOs were talking directly to the staff and we're actually hearing conversations and questions directed at them, maybe in a way that they hadn't had before, because it usually comes through a filter of boards and meetings of that sort. And actually you don't hear the essence of what people are trying to say. And off of the back of that Shining Spotlight on BAME event, the G15 pledge actually came into play. In terms of the G15 pledge, I'd say those of you who are not aware of the G15 pledge or don't know what it's about, I'll go and Google it. If you go into the G15 organization, they have the G15 Ethnic Diversity Pledge, and it talks you through exactly what that's about. And just to give you a brief summary, it's a pledge which all of the G15 members or chief executives signed up to in 2020, off of the back of the Shining Spotlight event that we hosted. And it's about representation of Black, Asian, and minority ethnic people on G15 member boards, and trying to make sure that that's increased, and also increased at an executive level. And it had organizations actually sign up to committing to more visibility in diverse people at all levels in their organizations. They signed up to collaborating to invest and support in minority ethnic talent or global majority talent. and also to celebrate their achievements, which then also led to the G15 Awards, which is an annual event which celebrates, global majority talent. So with all of that, it's just important to understand where kind of Unify came from, and maybe, where we're going off the back of that. So I'll hand over to Dami now, just to talk you through where we are now.
Thank you, Alozie. Dami, over to you.
Thank you, Alozie. And Alozie has done justice to the history of Unify, and it's really important that we pay homage, like you said, to where we've come. I'm a big believer in, I know sometimes they say we shouldn't look back, but I think history always allows you to be able to inform how you move forward. So, like Alozie said, we've done quite a number of events. We have a number of leadership programs and a number of things that we have going on in Unify. And for a volunteer-led organization, I would say we're actually delivering a lot. Like Alozie said, Alozie works for Camden Council as a building safety person. I work for Notting Hill Genesis as the head of change management. And so we've all got really busy jobs. But the key thing that we need to understand about Unify is it's a collection of individuals who are really passionate about this cause, about increasing and ensuring that we have diverse representation across the communities that we serve. We've talked a lot about organizations within the G15, but I think as a sector, generally, we serve very diverse communities. And, some of the things that we've kind of talked about in the news over the last couple of months or years within the sector, I've kind of highlighted why it's important that we hear from the communities that we serve. And also, I think sometimes when we make that delineation between the communities that we serve and the organizations that we work in, we are quite a very diverse sector. We're a sector that has people coming from different ethnicities, different backgrounds. However, it doesn't always translate to those voices being heard or those voices being kind of acknowledged in how we shape some of our policies, procedures, and, a wide range of things. This is not to say that representation is the only thing that Unify stands for, but it is one of our key hallmarks, like Alozie mentioned earlier. It is something that we're really keen to see, not just from we want to tick a box, but from the fact that it has been proven, both in various statistics from outside the sector, within the sector, that having a diverse group of people across various elements actually allows for better decision-making, better business decisions, and better outcomes for the communities that we serve, especially in a sector that deals with what I like to say is a very key thing to people's lives. We work in the social housing sector, regardless of whether people own their home, they rent, it is a home. And so nothing is more personal to someone than their home. And your home is a reflection of who you are. Your home is a reflection of your background, your experiences, who makes you who you are. And so for us to be able to make decisions and for us to be able to enact policies that allows that to shine through into the communities that we serve, it is quite important that we have ethnic diverse representation across all levels of the organization, and that's what Unify is here for. So we want to continue that conversation, and I think, as Alozie said, we've done a lot of work so far, and like I said, we've partnered with so many partner organizations and we've achieved a lot. However, I do think that it is the whole anti-racism conversation does sometimes feel like it's a conversation that people want to skip over now, because we're like, oh, that's a conversation that we've done. But Unify, one of the hallmarks of what we're trying to do is to continue that conversation. Like I said, there's the reason why me and Alozie have kind of split into two. We have to acknowledge all of the great work that's happened, but that conversation needs to continue. We can't allow that conversation to go into the background. And so we need to continue those conversations. We need to continue investing. Like Alozie said, he made a mention to the G15 pledge, and I'm going to just not go into the specifics of it. Like Alozie said, do Google it, but there are further things that we need to build up off the back of that, not just within the G15, but across the sector as a whole, which is, committing to be ethnically diverse at all levels of our organization is like something that I think that the sector should still should still want to do, because as like I said, all of the statistics go into it and show that does make business sense. And it's also investing in and supporting the talent that we've got within our organizations. And like Alozie said, we have quite a number of programs that do into that. He's talked about the Leadership Now program. We've got a G15 mentoring program, which is the development directors mentoring people within their organization, because that's the leadership of that specific element within our sector isn't as diverse as it could be. So, and that's a really great thing that we've run with the G15 for a number of years now. So there's a number of other things, and we've got plans of how we move this forward as an organization, working across the sector, working with organizations across the sector. Like Alozie mentioned, we have had really great partnerships with organizations like HDN, which I know, for instance, have got a lot of good practice. And Matt mentioned earlier that he actually met Alozie at an HDN breakout at one of the housing conferences. So we are quite open to collaboration. Like Alozie said, the word Unify is literally what it says on the tin. We are really keen on ensuring that we're working with partner organizations, collaborating. And I also like to also point out that sometimes when we're talking about ethnic diversity, it feels like it's just one thing, but I also like to point out to the fact that there's intersectionality. So you have, if you didn't notice, I'm a Black woman. So there are issues that would come into the fact that I'm a woman, and also being someone from an ethnically diverse background as well. We have people, and as Alozie alluded to earlier, we've done work with House Proud for people who fall within that demographic. So if we do say as Unify that we are talking about ethnic diversity, it doesn't mean that we don't recognize those other protector characteristics. It just means that that's what we're trying to advocate for within the sector. And we've been quite successful so far, but I think what we're trying to do in the future is, yes, let's build up on what we've done so far. We've really laid great foundations. I think for a volunteer-led organization, we really laid really great foundations, and I'm really excited for what we as a team are planning for the next couple of years, and how we can further this conversation and like have conversations like this. As in, it's really important that we continue these conversations and just show what we can all do together. I think I'm always really proud. We had the G15 Awards this year with the Unify, where we celebrated our ethnically diverse colleagues who are working really hard within our organizations. But then I think this year we also had an additional category where we actually appreciated our residents from ethnically diverse backgrounds who are doing a lot of work within our communities. And so for me, it's those poignant moments are really proud for us to say, this is what can happen when we work together to achieve great outcomes. So that's what we're looking to do moving forward. We, like Alozie said, there are certain moments in history that kind of bring these things to the fore. For instance, this year in the summer, we had the riots across various parts of the UK. Like I said, I don't want to really give air to the riots in themselves, but I think those moments in time create poignant moments that remind us that these conversations are conversations that we can't stop having, because sometimes I think we do get complacent and we're like, oh, this isn't something that we need to talk about. But we held a listening session with our member groups. I also want to emphasize that we are specifically here for our member organizations, and that's the staff networks, like Alozie mentioned earlier. Alozie, and similar to me, I was also a staff network chair before he became, I always joke, I always joke that I was a staff network chair before he became the rave of the moment. And it was a very lonely place. It was very, very lonely. It was something like, people are like, why are you talking about this? And then all of a sudden, George Floyd happened in 2020 and everyone wanted to talk about it, So being a network chair is really, really hard work. And so we listen. So at Unify as an organization, there are a lot of organizations within the sector who do this work in various forms. But for Unify, it's really important that we speak to our member organizations. It's really important that we speak to the people who are on the ground, so to speak, the people who normally no one would listen to. So one of the things that we did, for instance, last year at the conference was we had a CEO, and we had a panel where we had the CEO and the staff network lead have a really, really frank and upfront conversations, because like I said, like Alozie said, sometimes what is filtered to, and you know, CEOs are really busy people. Sometimes they're not quite on the pulse of what is happening within their organization. And it was really, really frank conversations. And that's what Unify stands for. And that's what we hope to continue doing. So yeah, that's a very brief, I know it wasn't that brief, overview of where we're going. But yeah, we're really willing to have those conversations. And like Alozie and you mentioned earlier, it's a conversation that we want to continue having with the Social Housing Roundtable and across the sector as a whole. So thank you.
This episode of the Social Housing Roundtable is sponsored by Alertical. Alertical helps as many people as possible feel safe, connected and informed by combining ingenious technology and award-winning human contact. Alertical's digital engagement solution helps social landlords proactively know their customers and properties by putting a portable touchscreen in every home, offering a daily property check through the optional OK Each Day service, plus repairs reporting, tenant surveys and much more. They also provide Beyond Warden Calls, an easier, simpler and lower cost wireless warden call solution with video door entry, dispersed telecare and smoke alarms. Alertical works with over 60 housing providers across the UK to enhance two-way engagement between customers and landlords. In 2022, Alertical won the Queen's Award for Enterprise and Innovation, and in 2023 won Housing Supplier of the Year. I'm delighted to have them as our sponsor of the Social Housing Roundtable throughout 2024.
No, thank you. And thank you both. I can completely empathise with trying to run a networking group and how people go, oh, it's just, you know, a bit of time here and there. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of effort. It's a lot of space given up, both mentally and in terms of actual, you know, physical time. So massive, massive kudos to the whole team for what you deliver and what you put together. I know there's already been a point raised in the chat from Dave, which said, you know, when are you looking to expand? You know, he'd love to do something like this about Scotland. But I mean, in general, I know that that's something which is, I think as the voice grows, is how do you grow it bigger? And I know predominantly kind of London based at the moment, obviously with the G15. I guess, do you see something like that being, you know, on the future docket, or at the moment is that focus purely London because of the concentration of the work that's going on?
Alozie, do you want me to take that?
Yeah, you go ahead.
So I don't want to say that it is definitely not something that we're not thinking about. We definitely are thinking about expanding beyond the London and the G15. The reason why it does feel like we are concentrated in London is because, as Alozie, like I said, it's always really good to understand where you're coming from before you know where you're going to. So we are definitely looking at expanding beyond the frontiers of London and the Southeast. So it's not even necessarily just London, but London and the Southeast. It does appear that way because most of our member organizations at the moment work for our organizations that are geographically located in that area. And like we've both mentioned, we are a volunteer-run organization, and we really are very particular about offering an excellent offer. If I'm being honest, we're very, very key on making sure that we are supporting in the best way that we can. And so we have to look at the sustainability of having to go off the back of volunteers, then having to expand into a national organization. And so those are the conversations and how we're funded and all the wide range of things that we need to think about in being able to do a national offer. But I'm going to be honest and say it is something that we are thinking about, but we have to think about the operational elements of it, the logistics of it, and not necessarily doing this off the back of volunteers who are already doing a lot of other things. And so, yeah, it definitely is something we're thinking about, but we probably need to have a broader conversation on how that would work moving forward and what model will work moving forward.
Completely understand that. There's a question here from Elizabeth that's come through saying it's so fantastic to see and hear all about your inspiring work. What I will just say before I read the question, if anybody wants to come in, please do use there's a react symbol at the bottom of the screen and use your raise hand function. We'd love to hear from you if you want to dive in. It'd be great. So fantastic to see and hear about your inspiring work here. As a board member of the Housing and Communities Board of the Centre for the New Midlands, we're working hard to retain and consistently improve diversity across our boards. Do you have any key pointers as to how we do this best, and how do we address true representation and inclusion in housing when expenses can be an issue for some, i.e. time off in work hours, transport, childcare, etc.? they'd love to hear your thoughts.
I think I'm going to let Alozie take that one.
Thank you, Dami. I appreciate you thinking about me in these periods. So, Elizabeth, great question. First thing I would say for you, Elizabeth, is if you haven't looked at the HDN's board diversity program, start there as a place to look at, because that program actually helps organizations to embed people within boards and learn as they go, and then also hopefully has a pipeline to them actually becoming a board member at a later stage. And I've seen some of the numbers of that program and it looks great. People actually getting board positions, actually getting the relevant experience. It might not be the experience that gets them into your organization particularly, but you signing up to it as being a host organization or also looking for board members is two ways you can kind of actually get that one hand of commitment if you're looking for support. So HDN board diversity programs, and I'm sure there's others out there which would support with some of that work. To the other point that you've raised in there around time off work hours, transport, childcare, that's a difficult one because I think it's always worth actually having honest conversations about this, how this can work. Because if we think about it, organizations, although as a sector there is a conversation about how much money is flowing at the moment and people are trying to pinch them pockets and make sure that they create a sustainable future for themselves and their housing market and then the residents, which is understandable. But we seem to always find money to have events or to have an awards or to if we have a focus on something that we want to deliver, the money seems to get found from somewhere. There's always a surplus somewhere that can be moved around. So I would also say it's a conversation about leadership commitment to it, because if the leaders want to, and I put this out there to leaders just as a conversation, this is just an open conversation. If we want it to happen, it will happen. It's just about the commitment and actually having an honest conversation about what does it take to get there, and then also having an action plan that's followed through. Because since the Scarman report back in the 70s, we've had action plans, diversity reports, all across the boards, and they're all saying similar things, all saying exactly the same thing in different ways. So we're not reinventing the wheel. We have solutions that are there. We've got McKinsey reports. We've got, I can't even, I don't know how many reports I've read, Lamy reports and the rest of those, which tell you about how society and how, we have solutions right now. So I wouldn't even say we need to develop anything new. We just need to go back to what's already there and look at how we're delivering that with more commitment and actually more visibility so that people can tell and track in terms of the delivery of what we want to do. So it probably went a bit of a segue from what you wanted in terms of an answer, but I'll say just look at the board diversity program to start with, and then tap into us as well, Elizabeth. We can definitely have a conversation and try and help open up those doors if that's something that you're looking forward to doing. Hopefully that answered.
Yeah, no, Liz already put, we can definitely host a session on expansion for the West Midlands through the centre, and I think there's a nice bit of partnership working that could go on there. So thank you very much. Claire, I'm going to bring you in. I know you put a couple of questions in the chat, but I'll let you come in to ask them. Thank you for raising your hand.
Yeah, so okay. I've got two questions. So the first question is just about volunteering. I'd be really interested in volunteering. I run a one-woman consultancy, but it is up north, so could perhaps help with expansion. But I'd be interested to know if you have any information on sort of the commitment level that you expect from your volunteers. And then the second question is slightly different. So I hear a lot about white allies relying on people of colour to educate them about what the issues are, what it feels like, and that's actually not fair or reasonable. So does Unify offer any sort of learning materials that people can access themselves to get their knowledge to where it needs to be, or at least on the right track?
Okay, so I'll start with the first question, which is the volunteering bit. And yes, we do are actively want to have volunteers working for us, but it is quite dependent on, so I don't think myself or Alozie actually mentioned the pillars. So we work on a pillar basis at the moment. So we've got 4 basic pillars, and Alozie, you're going to say, Dami, can you remind me? It's networking, events,
yeah,
networking events, because I'm always mixing up mentoring and L&D. So it's it's networking, events, career. Yeah, career and
mentoring.
Oh my God, I'm gonna just look. Just gonna go look and just say it.
Mentoring.
Mentoring, yes, thank you. So those are the 4 main pillars. And so the volunteering we are actively looking for volunteers, and the time commitment, like we said, it depends and fixed on troughs and what your role is within what we're going to be doing within Unify. So we would normally say it would it varies. So I don't want to give you an answer and say it's going to take you 10 hours of time.
I guess that was the question really. Can it be flexible? Is it something that will fit around?
It will be flexible around what the needs are. Like we are going through a transitional period at the moment where we're trying to kind of firm up some of our governance and terms of reference. So when you do become a volunteer within a particular pillar, you are sort of clear on, and I can see Kelly, lovely Kelly in the chat putting in our volunteers link in there. So it depends on what the need is. Again, it's something that I'm very keen on. I think sometimes, and it kind of segues into your next question, which is I think across the board, people we do take for granted what it takes on physically, mentally, psychologically for people to do volunteering roles. So at Unify, we're very keen on ensuring that we're not overusing is the word I want to look for, being very reasonable in the expectation for someone who's passionate about, because what happens, and I have been there, where you're very passionate about a topic and you take on so much and it can lead to burnout. So we're very we're being very, one of the things we're working on at the moment is being very clear on, if you volunteer for Unify, you're quite clear that it would mean if you're volunteering for this, it would be about 10 hours of your time. So when we are going over that, we begin to know that, do you know what, I think we're beginning to ask too much of this person. So I don't know if I really answered your question, but it really
I think you did, yeah.
On what we're volunteering for and what the need is. So like Alozie said, we do a number of things. So it could be that we're doing a big conference, and at that point, like we're kind of, you know, putting all of our resources and, you know, working towards the conference, or we're doing we're launching a program. At the moment, we're launching 2 of our flagship programs. One is starting in January, another one started a couple of weeks ago, and then, you know, that's where the resources are. So it's really, really dependent on what we require, what we're doing at any particular point in time. To your second question, I wouldn't necessarily say that we have a repository. Our website is quite varied, where there are a number of things that you can look on our website, but like I said, we like to see ourselves as a signposter. So we would often try to work with other member organizations, who are doing similar work. So I don't believe, and I think most of us don't believe in reinventing the wheel. So if HDN, so I'll give an example. So in August, when we had the riots, we held a listening session where we had our member organizations come to us and we had a conversation, and then we signposted them to other great things that people are doing within the sector. So HDN did a really good framework around how organizations can support their ethnically diverse staff. So what we tend to do is we have a repository, and then we'll signpost you to that. So yeah, in short answer to your question, there are things that we can signpost our white allies to, specifically around the work that other organizations are doing, because I think there's no need us trying to invent the wheel when there's already something on there. Let's just direct people to the work that other people are doing and kind of highlighting that those resources that are already there. So I hope that answered your question, Claire.
Yeah, it does, and it's really useful to know. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
And Claire, there's an expectation about when you volunteer, you have to sing a song in your first session. So get picked. You know.
I don't know if you've met me before, but singing a song is definitely not a problem for me.
Oh, right.
I'm also very not shy.
Good.
Thank you very much. And as Dami mentioned, Kelly has put the link unifynetwork.org.uk/volunteer if anyone would be interested in progressing with that. There is a question from Lara, which I'm going to go back to in just a minute, because Brian's had his hand up for a little while. So Brian, do please come in.
Sorry, just trying to get it unmuted. You might detect from the accent that I have that I'm not a local, and I live in Barnsley in South Yorkshire. And I think one of the comments that's come across is that the answer is there. From my accent, you will probably guess that my nationality was one of those that were on the signs and windows in London when it came to renting properties. My lifestyle is something that would have ended me in jail before 1967. And I find that it's still within organizations and within parts of the country, you still come across a stigma that's come across from organizations, and a lot of organizations they're ticking boxes. You know, I came across recently somebody who was talking about an equality, diversity, and inclusion policy. I'm saying at the time, you know, it's something that we should be accepting, equality, irrespective of your status, irrespective of your position. I'm a tenant, and I have the same basis that every other tenant has. I sign a document which is a tenancy agreement. And I think it's lost within a lot of organizations. And I've heard it said quite a few times that when you look at the boards and you look at, we say, local authorities and everything else, and you look at the people who sit on these, that has been lost over a number of years, where you've got a certain group of people, and to me it's cronyism. It's a situation where that stigma it remains because the people who should be making the changes don't, and it's causing that issue. Certainly, you know, when I grew up in the society I grew up in, it was very religious society, but I always treated everybody with the same respect they treated me. And I think that's lost within organizations, and I don't think its staff are supported when it comes to doing that. And I think that's where organizations are falling down, is providing the support and the backup to staff. And they're losing out on that because they're losing people who are very, very good staff who want to make a difference, be it within the organization or be it the tenants who they meet on the street. And, you know, these are people that come into your home. I don't have a problem with who comes to my home, but a lot of people do. And it's still entrenched in a lot of organizations and a lot of communities. And I think the answers are there. And I think it starts off with that first word, equality. Everybody is equal, you know, and until we get that embedded within organizations, this will just continue at times.
Thank you very much, Brian. Dami or Alozie, anything you'd like to come back on what Brian's just shared there? But thank you very much, Brian.
I think Brian's spoken from the heart. And you know, going back to Alozie's point, I personally am tired of reports. Like, can we just not have any more reports? Can we just action what we've already got? And so that's part of the work that we're trying to do at Unify, which is how can we create practical frameworks? How can we create practical pathways and conversations, and how we can actually, and Ryan used a very important word, embed. Because it is possible to have an organization that looks diverse, but then you don't have inclusive practices embedded across the fabric of the organization. We don't have to, I always say this, we don't have to have long conversations around how we talk about value for money. We don't have to have long conversations about how we talk about sustainability. We don't have to have long conversations about how and I'm not saying we're perfect. I know there's a wide variety of reasons, a wide variety of challenges, but you know, if there are certain things that need to happen from a regulatory compliance perspective, we just do it because we need to do it. So it's not a long conversation. And so I would say that that's where we need to get to in this conversation as well, where it is embedded. It isn't seen as something that is different. It's just what we do. Like, and for you to do that, it needs systemic investment. It needs continuous, and that's why I said there's a lot that has been done, but there's a lot more that still needs to be done, and it's a conversation that needs to continue, because we can't rest on our R's and become complacent about these conversations. It just needs to continue, and that's what we're part of. What we're hoping to be part of. And the reason why I said earlier, it's they're a group of passionate people. I'm one of those people who says, "Are you going to stay unknown, or are you going to be part of the solution?" And that's what we're trying to do at Unify.
And then, go on, Alozie, please.
Yeah, I was just gonna. Dami just summed it up perfectly, and Brian, I completely hear you there, and I love what you're saying with complete honesty, because one of the things that I feel as not just organization but as a society we need to do more is remove stigma, because that just creates that division where you can't have a conversation because someone's got a different view to you. Doesn't mean you can't have a conversation. I might not vote conservative, but it doesn't mean that I can't have a conversation with somebody who's a conservative. That's actually where we bridge the gaps. And this echo chamber that some of our organizations, I have to say, promote with not having that transparency and allowing people to be free. For example, Palestine, people can't talk about things freely. It doesn't mean because you're talking about Palestine or talking about support for Palestine, you're anti-Israeli. You know, you can be both. There's not one or other within an organization or conversation. So I think, and I use that as a proxy to talk about anti-racism and anything else that what we're talking about, divisionary. You know, we need to be able to have these conversations openly, honestly, so that we can find some common ground. And actually, that's where we start to move it forward as a society, because I don't wait for policies and policies look great on a piece of paper, but how do the people communicate with that on the ground? You know, I read a policy and I just think, all right, this is words. This is great. It's a tick box for me, but how does your environment, what does that look like? How do your people feel when they come into work? Are they positive about their workplace? Do they feel comfortable about themselves? Can they go outside? We spend so much time in the workplace. We spend most of our days, our hours in the workplace. So surely it should be a place that's modeling what we want in our society. Maybe that could make a real difference rather than the other way around. So, you know, I think that there needs to be open conversations about that. And Dami was spot on about actually having frameworks where we're actually monitoring and transparent about the things that we can do and we can't do, because organizations are also a bit frightened to say, oh, well, we committed to that, but it's not working. It's not a failure. You just have to build on it. You know, you can have some learning from some of those failings. So I just really resonate with what you said there. You know, this is more of a societal thing as well, and something I think we should be modeling within the sector.
I couldn't agree more, and I think that's the situation we're at. And I loved your point around we've forgotten how to have a conversation with someone that we disagree with. Like, and it's created so many divides. I mean, you look at America right now, you look at our own society, you look at the divide. I think one of the, I guess, counterpoints that could be argued from Brian's point is the fact that whilst there is a lot of stigmatization within housing, unfortunately, we're living in a society which is quite governmentally can be driven to divide. And that's creating a lot of challenges itself in trying to bridge some of those gaps. And I think that's a huge, huge problem we've got. Again, I think it comes down to why, you know, that ability to have a conversation is lost. But also it's, you know, I think someone mentioned earlier, I think it was Claire mentioned about being a white ally, how to be a white ally and all that kind of, you know, I know we've had conversations on this roundtable before around kind of why is it always the voices of those being stigmatized to try and change the voice, to try and change the narrative. It's very easy to just have a conversation, to get people in the room and have chats like this. All you've got to do is listen and engage and reach out. And I think that's sometimes my call is saying, look, if you don't know what to do, go and ask somebody who is getting involved in it. Because I tell you what, there's always a conversation to be had. It's just about being able to kind of say, actually, you know, if you're in a boardroom, if you're in a housing provider, if whatever else, and you hear, you know, language or terminology that isn't that you fundamentally disagree with or you think is a bit amoral, come and say, look, actually, and don't create a massive aggression over it. Don't start a fight over it, but kind of go, look, actually, I disagree. Why is your mindset like this? How do we change that narrative and how do we build on this? Because I've known directors walk through, and I mean, I have conversations monthly with directors and chief execs who are walking through their contact centres and someone saying, well, oh, why are we saying that about our tenants? Why are we thinking that? Where has that mindset come from? And how do we change that in in a culturally okay way, in a conversation that actually is going to drive things forward within our own culture of the business, not culturally wider. Because that's what needs to happen if we're going to change. And actually, one of the questions that come through from Lara was, how would you both define Unify's measure of success? Or what would be successful maybe over the next 6, 12, both months and years, I guess, for Unify in terms of trying to shape that narrative and change what's happening?
So I think it's not a straightforward answer, because the metrics and indices would be different around certain things. So we can have the core number metrics, which we if you look on our website, you will see some of our impact reports, which is we have X amount of people who signed up to this program, and then they've gone on to, get a promotion. We've had X amount of people who've done that. So you have those, what I like to call the quantitative metrics, which we are working on, and it's something that I come from a data-driven background in what I do in my day job, so I would always like to quantify success because it has to be measurable. However, I do think that there is also the softer side, and I don't like that word soft, so maybe just say the more qualitative, which is some of the conversations that we've been having and off the back of Brian's contribution / question, which is the change in our organizations generally around how we talk about some of these issues that are difficult to speak about, and seeing an authenticity and an transparency across our organizations to have really hard conversations, and that sometimes we feel that our members feel that they don't have that space to have those conversations, and so visibly, that would be a marker of success for me personally, where we're able to have those conversations. We're able to, across various levels of the organization, our staff network groups, that's a really key pillar of what we do. So that's why it's a pillar. The network groups, how are we supporting our staff network groups to be able to drive those change and drive accountability across the sector, across leadership within the sector. So yeah, those two things, I think personally for me, will be things that I think would be markers of success. So we can have the core metrics. I love the core metrics. I love the numbers. That would be great. And we've got, even on the pledge, if you look at the G15 pledge, there are things like percentages and all of those things. 30% of people across, all of those things are great. But it is okay to tick a box to be able to say we've then been able to achieve 50% of board diversity across. But what does that really mean? Someone put in the chat, I'm a big believer in just not ticking a box for a global majority person. What is your organization truly like for that person to thrive? Because you can appoint someone. The real test is in not them being appointed, but them feeling that they can, and I don't really like this word, but I'll use it, in being in themselves and who they are. One thing that you have to understand for someone who's in that position is when you are someone from a global majority or minority ethnic group, there is an added pressure that it's just there. And so you can be appointed to these positions, but does the environment allow you to thrive? So I think for me, I know I've done a very long-winded way of answering the question, but those are the two things that I would really like to see. So let's have the core metrics, because I think that's what business understands. Business understands core metrics. Business understands, percentages and numbers. However, you can't really put a number on the other things that are equally as important, which are truly the things that would allow us to have much more inclusive organizations that serve the communities that we're here to serve. And I always like to say, we always have to remember that we're here to serve communities. We're just not, at the very basis of what the social housing sector is not just about the numbers, it's about serving communities.
Couldn't agree more. Alozie, anything that you would add in terms of I guess that wider aim for Unify and what you'd like to see them, what those successes might be?
Sure, I'd say world domination, global conferences on EDI where we're able to show what the sectors are doing across different continents, what are our people. But this is me being very, if I was being, I think Dami answered the question really well, to be honest. I think for me, I agree with Dami. I think having data sector-wise, consistent data, the National Housing Federation have got a diversity data framework or policy which they brought out, having organizations sign up to that and actually feed into that so that we can actually benchmark realistically. Then we can start to talk about what the data means across the board. You know, I feel like it's not consistent. Some people do the ethnicity pay gap. Some people do, you know, I know the gender pay gap is mandated, but that's not very consistent at the moment, and people do it in different ways. So I feel like that consistency across the board starts for us to start to build some of that conversation that we can really have. Because sometimes you can't really pinpoint one organization is doing really well, another organization seemingly doing that well as well, but then you look underneath, it's not consistent. So people having different nuanced experiences. So just a way to actually bring that together. I think your sector, Matt, success to me would be diverse recruitment. You know, recruitment consultants are almost running our, you know, our sector in terms of delivery of staff and talent and turnover. You know, most organizations go out to a recruitment consultant immediately or have a framework with them. So we need to place a lot of pressure, and I say pressure, more collaboration in a way to make sure that the people are having diverse panels, diverse talent pools that are coming in at board level, at executive level, at management level. You know, that should be mandated before you even sign a contract. If you're not bringing to me a diverse panel of whatever percentage, I'm not talking to you. You know, let's have that conversation first. You know, so data, recruitment, and I would also say just bridging the gap, because we talk about Brian, just, you know, we've got people in here who are from different areas around the country. I think there is a bit of a divide between London, you know, the south and the north, and actually having that maybe bridge that gap a little bit more in terms of what we're doing as Unify and how those experiences kind of come together. I think that will be success for me. So maybe those three things: data, recruitment, and maybe bridging the gap and a bit more networking.
I mean, I could do a whole spiel on recruitment, Alozie. I couldn't agree with you more. I know this is where you and I first kind of conversed, was around this idea of actually, if you're a business and you should be able to, particularly if you're in one of the big cities, you should be able to get a diverse panel. You shouldn't have a candidate walk in and see three white guys behind a table. It doesn't matter about levels and things like that of where you are in the business. As a white guy walking into an interview, it doesn't matter what the interview panel will be. I will not have my confidence knocked probably by who's behind the table. That is not the same for everybody, and that needs to be shouted from the rooftop. And we need to get that changed. And never mind. And you said maybe not pressure. Definitely put pressure on your recruitment partners if you're working with recruitment partners. If they do present you an all-white shortlist, that isn't always a bad thing. You just need to understand why. If they've turned around and gone, this is where I've been, this is who I've spoken to, this is who I've reached out to, and they can showcase that they have attempted to really kind of go diverse and reach out to multiple businesses, then great. If they haven't, and if they've just gone to their database of their tried and tested people they've worked with for 20, 30 years, they're not doing enough. Rant over. Liz had said in the chat there that she was concerned that as landlords get bigger and bigger, the personal relationships with tenants deteriorate. The high turnover of staff Brian has raised as a symptom of where all of us joined housing to help others. There's a culture of imposing business decisions on people, and consultation simply being lip service to tenants whose views can be considered a barrier to operational objectives. And Nadine said, you know, thank you so much. Look forward to connecting more with Unify. Lara also messaged, say, is the ultimate success a world where entities such as Unify don't need to exist, which is absolutely wonderful. And I love the idea of world domination, because Elaine joined me saying exactly that for the roundtable. So we'll do it together. Alozie, Dami, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm aware we've got about a minute left. What final thoughts would you just like to share with the panel, particularly, you know, I know we're going to be carrying on these next year. So are there any final thoughts you'd like to share before we log off today?
Thank you for having us, Matt. Thank you for everyone who's joined as well. I think final thoughts, as in, look out. I think please, I always say that everyone, one way or the other, has an opportunity to shape change within their own little corner of the world. So I think that's the final thing, as in push, like you know, if you have the opportunity to be at a certain table, be the person who says, this is not a diverse panel. So you know, every single one of us, if we keep pushing, we are going to be able to make incremental change. It doesn't have to be the big pledges, and you know, in our little way, we all have some level of leverage that we can pull, and just do that if you can.
I agree. I'll just say, I'll leave you for a word. Be brave. Be brave. In whatever you're doing, if you're standing up for somebody, if you're standing up for something, be brave. You're not alone. That's probably my last message. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Cannot wait to have you both on again next year. Really looking forward to what 2025 is going to bring. Obviously, if there's any support we can offer with Unify, please say. Do please reach out to Alozie and Dami via LinkedIn, via Unify. Let's help spread the word of what's going on. Next week, the Social Housing Roundtable, Claire, who was with us earlier, is coming on to talk about whether it's time to rebrand scrutiny, and that ties quite nicely into some of the points we've had today. And I know the team from Stop Social Housing Stigma were putting some of the words in the chat around as well, what we can do to destigmatize. But for now, Dami, Alozie, thank you so much for coming on today. I look forward to supporting Unify moving forward. And thank you to everyone else who could join us as well. Cheers and take
Thank
care.
you, everyone. Bye.
See you later, guys.
See you later. Bye.
Have a good day.